I'm Avery. I'm 34 years old. And if you follow me, you know I'm the CEO of the Sterling Luxury Hotels, an East Coast brand I built from the ground up, and signature events. If you look at me now, you see the successful entrepreneur, the woman in the well-tailored suit. But the truth is, I'm about to tell you the story of a wedding that never happened, a family drama that cost me $80,000 and nearly broke my heart, all thanks to the one person I thought would never betray me, my brother Ethan. If you're watching this, drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button, because this is a ride about love, loss, and learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them go, even when they're family. Ethan and I grew up in Queens, New York, not the fancy brownstones you see in movies, but a triple-decker apartment where the wallpaper was peeling and the winter wind whistled through the window frames. He was 2 years older than me, but he always felt like my rock. We had that sibling bond that's forged in fire, the kind where you look at each other and you know, deep down, that you are the only two people who truly understand what it took to survive your childhood. Our world shattered when I was 12 and Ethan was 14. Our parents, George and Diane, went through a divorce that was less a parting of ways and more a cold, protracted war. It wasn't about who got the house. It was about who could inflict the most emotional damage. There were late-night arguments that sounded like breaking glass. Doors slammed so hard the pictures on the wall tilted, and the constant, chilling silence of two people who hated each other but were forced to share space. We were their unwilling messengers, passing venomous notes under the guise of casual conversation. Tell your father the check is late, or tell your mother to stop calling me at the office. The aftermath of the divorce left us financially crippled and emotionally depleted. Mom tried her best, juggling 2 minimum wage jobs, but we were always scraping by. That's when Ethan and I stepped up. I remember my first real job. I was 16, working at an old-school diner on the corner of our street. I'd be scrubbing grease off the counter at 10 p.m., smelling of coffee and stale fries, hiding my paycheck in my sock so no one could touch it. Ethan, he was a natural hustler. By the time he was 18, he was working construction during the day and stocking shelves at a grocery store at night. He gave up on the idea of college early, a decision I know he wrestled with because he saw the reality. One of us had to keep the lights on. "You're the brains, Ave," he'd tell me, his voice rough but warm. "I'll be the muscle. You get out of Queens, you go to that big university, and you study those fancy hotel books. We'll be all right." Ethan wasn't just working for his own pocket, he was working for mine. Every month, a crumpled envelope would show up on my dresser, his contribution to my university fund. I was accepted into the hotel management program at Cornell, a dream I couldn't have afforded without him. While I was pulling all-nighters studying market segmentation and revenue management, Ethan was pouring concrete and swinging a hammer, his hands calloused and his back aching. All so I could chase a life he had deferred for himself. That's how our foundation was built, on mutual sacrifice, absolute trust, and a fierce, unspoken promise that we would always, always protect each other. He was more than my brother. He was my co-founder in life. This isn't just a detail. It's the core of the story. I needed you to understand that level of devotion, the profound debt of love and gratitude, to understand how deep the wound went when it all came crashing down. When I finally graduated and started working, I made a silent vow. Ethan would never go without again. I climbed the corporate ladder fast, moving from assistant manager to director of operations in 5 years. But the corporate grind wasn't enough. I wanted to build something real, something that honored our shared struggle. That's when I found the old, run-down Parkview Grand, a fading relic in downtown New York. I poured every penny, every ounce of sweat equity into buying it and transforming it into the first sterling grand, the cornerstone of my luxury brand. And guess who was there? Ethan. He was the first person I called. He took a 2-month leave from his construction job, flew down, and helped me supervise the entire renovation. He didn't charge me a dime, saying, "My expertise is your equity avenue. This is our future, remember." He leveraged his network of contractors, getting me deals and discounts that saved me hundreds of thousands. That's the kind of man he was. He was good, decent, and loyal to a fault, especially to me. When Sterling Grand launched, it was an instant success. The reviews were stellar, the bookings were solid, and soon I was expanding the brand, acquiring new properties and launching Signature Events, my high-end food service company. I was living the American dream, and Ethan was right there, celebrating every win with me. We had made it. We were the Warren kids from Queens, and we had built an empire on grit and love. But life, as we all know, loves to test your foundations. And my foundation, my relationship with Ethan, was about to be shaken to its core by a single introduction, a woman named Chloe. That story, and the shift that began to erode everything we built, is where the real drama of Chapter 2 begins. Stay tuned, because you won't believe how quickly a strong man can change when faced with the glittering temptation of a life he never thought he could have. When Ethan met Chloe Hayes, it wasn't at a dive bar in Queens or over a pizza at our old spot. It happened at a charity gala in Miami Beach, where my Signature Events team was serving, and the whole scene felt instantly, jarringly wrong. If you're watching, you know how good my team is: polished, professional, invisible when they need to be. Chloe, however, saw them all too clearly and not in a good way. She was stunning, I'll give her that. Blonde, impeccable, draped in a gown that whispered 6 figures, and she carried herself with the kind of effortless superiority that only comes from never having worried about a bill in your life. Ethan, bless his heart, the man of honest steel and muscle, was instantly captivated. He was used to women who respected his hands. Chloe was used to men who respected her bank account. The first red flag wasn't a flicker, it was a flare. While Ethan was talking to another guest, I watched Leo, one of my best catering captains. Leo, an NYU grad working his way through film school, was polite, efficient, and well-spoken. Chloe spilled a drop of champagne on her cuff, a minor accident, and instead of a casual apology, she sighed dramatically, looking Leo up and down. "Can't the service staff manage to walk in a straight line these days?" she muttered, loud enough to make Leo flush scarlet. She didn't acknowledge him as a person. She acknowledged him as a failed utility. It was a small thing, but it cut me deep. Ethan and I were Leo. We were the people who tolerated that condescension. Yet, when I brought it up later, Ethan dismissed it with an airy wave of his new, expensive hand. "Come on, Avenue. That's just society talk. Chloe's not like us. She's high class, you know. She expects a certain level. Don't be so sensitive. Don't be so sensitive." That phrase alone was a chisel on the foundation we built. The real trouble started when I met her mother, Vivian Hayes. If Chloe was a polished trophy, Vivian was the stern, exacting curator. She hosted me at their sprawling estate in Palm Beach, Florida, a place so quiet and manicured it felt like a museum. Vivian wasn't loud, she was cold. She spoke in veiled insults, like darts dipped in honey. When Ethan proudly explained my business, my 4 luxury hotels, and my catering empire, Vivian didn't congratulate me. She tilted her head and offered a condescending smile. "Oh, Avery, that is just quaint. It's lovely that you're so active. It must be exhausting, all that dealing with complaints and service employees." Ethan assures us you'll sell off those little ventures once you settle into your role as a wife. The implication was clear. My self-made success was just a cute, temporary distraction until I achieved my real, appropriate status, being an appendage to a wealthy man. And Ethan, standing right there, didn't defend my passion. He actually chuckled nervously and added, "Yeah, Ave's always been a workaholic, but she'll calm down soon." That comment stung more than any market crash or renovation disaster. Ethan knew how fiercely I loved my work. He knew my hotels weren't just businesses. They were my defiance against the poverty of our past. Yet he was apologizing for my ambition, treating my core character as a charming, yet embarrassing flaw. The distance between us became a chasm. Our traditional Sunday dinners at the old Italian place in Brooklyn became monthly, then rare occurrences. When we did meet, Chloe was always present, checking her watch, rolling her eyes when Ethan and I lapsed into our old Queen's codes or shared inside jokes from childhood. She actively extinguished the light between us. Ethan started changing, not just his clothes, but his vocabulary. He swapped his reliable Ford F-150 for a leased Range Rover he clearly couldn't sustain. He talked about the right circles and established families, using phrases that were completely foreign to the man who once counted coins with me on our bedroom floor. He was desperately trying to mold himself into the image the Hayes had for him, a polished, acceptable version of the rugged construction foreman. It was painful to witness. The Ethan I knew was being suffocated by the desperation to belong. Then came the call. A few weeks after a particularly tense, awkward dinner where Vivian had spent 20 minutes lecturing Ethan on the correct vintage of Bordeaux, Ethan called me, his voice bursting with a feverish, almost manic joy. She said, "Yes, Ave, we're getting married." He launched into the details. The proposal at the Hayes sprawling summer house in the Hamptons, the string quartet, the $150,000 4-carat diamond ring. It was magnificent, extravagant, and utterly un-Ethan. I listened, forcing myself to sound thrilled, but inside, a knot of fear tightened in my stomach. "That's wonderful, Ethan," I managed to say. "Have you talked about the wedding yet? Where will you hold it?" His excitement immediately deflated. "That's the thing. Chloe wants the St. Regis Ballroom or the Breakers in Palm Beach. Vivian says the best venues book 2 years out, and the costs are insane. My manager's salary, even with the bonus, barely covers the property taxes on those places." The stress was back in his voice, the realization that he was an imposter in his own engagement. I knew this was my last chance to save him, or at least to anchor him back to the reality of our bond. I had to make a gesture so grand, so unequivocally rooted in my unconditional love, that it would remind him of everything we stood for. I had to use the one thing they respected, my success, to buy him some peace. "Don't worry about the venue, Ethan," I interrupted, a plan forming instantly. "You're getting married at the Sterling Grand in Dallas, Texas. My gift, venue, basic catering, everything. I'll make sure it's perfect. Consider it an investment in your happiness." I was willing to spend whatever it took to keep my brother from drowning in that debt and desperation. I was willing to sacrifice the profit for months of hard work. I was going to put down a deposit so massive, so generous, that it would show the Hayes that I was an equal, and more importantly, it would show Ethan that I was still his only true partner. I thought this grand $80,000 gesture would build a bridge to his new life. I had no idea I was merely building the very platform from which they would try to push me off the edge. That shocking realization is the core of Chapter 3. My offer to host Ethan and Chloe's wedding at the Sterling Grand and cover the venue and basic catering, a value of $80,000, was meant to be an olive branch and a financial lifeline. I envisioned it as a shield, protecting Ethan from the crushing expectations of the Hayes. I signed the internal contract, formally earmarking the sum. But Chloe and Vivian didn't see a gift. They saw leverage and an opportunity for exploitation. The moment the deposit was secured, my involvement ceased. I, the owner of the venue, the sister of the groom, and the principal financier of the base event, was immediately ushered to the sidelines. Chloe appointed Lauren Bell, a notoriously expensive wedding planner from the city, and Lauren became the Hayes gatekeeper. "Oh, Avery is too busy running her little company," Chloe told Lauren whenever I asked to attend a tasting or a design meeting. "We don't want to bother her with the aesthetic decisions. It's better if the venue owner isn't too involved. It might look like a conflict of interest." Conflict of interest? No, it was conflict of class. They didn't want the service provider in the room when they were making patron decisions. The subtle demands quickly escalated into brazen entitlement. Chloe and Vivian scheduled meetings with my overworked venue coordinator, Andrew, at 7 a.m., then canceled 5 minutes beforehand, all without apology. They demanded 15 different sample menus from my signature event chefs, world-class talent, only to reject them all and insist on bringing in an external celebrity pastry chef from France, a move that cost them a massive fee and was a deliberate snub to my company. The most egregious demand came during a site visit focused on the grand ballroom. Vivian looked up at the original, handcrafted Venetian chandelier, a fixture I had spent over a year and thousands of dollars restoring, and wrinkled her nose. "It's simply too dark," she declared, as if she were reviewing a poorly lit basement. "And the bronze doesn't match Chloe's aesthetic vision of silver and pearl. We must have it temporarily dismantled and replaced with a custom crystal fixture from Milan." I stared at her, my blood turning to ice. "Vivian, that chandelier is a historic fixture. It's literally part of the building's architectural designation. It's not going anywhere." Vivian gave me her trademark tight smile. "Well, darling, if the venue owner can't accommodate the bride's fundamental vision, perhaps we need to revisit the contract. After all, the deposit has been paid, but there are countless other high-end venues in this city that would be thrilled to accommodate the Hayes family's needs." It was a veiled threat. She was wagering that I cared more about losing Ethan's wedding, the symbolic completion of my generous gift, than I did about the integrity of my property. I had to compromise, allowing them to install massive, floor-to-ceiling white draperies and special lighting to visually hide the chandelier, a solution that still felt like a violation. The whole process felt like watching a beautiful structure being corroded from the inside out. I kept my professionalism intact, reminding myself I was doing this for Ethan, the kid who walked me to school every day. I told my loyal staff to bear with the bridezilla behavior, even though they were clearly strained. The situation became unbearable when the official wedding invitations started arriving at family homes. Heavy cardstock, gold foil, meticulously calligraphed envelopes. My mother called, excited. My Aunt Susan texted me a picture of hers. My mailbox? Empty. I convinced myself it was an oversight. They must assume I don't need one, being the sister and the owner. But the feeling of unease festered. I casually asked Ethan about it. "Oh, the invitations went out last week," he said vaguely. "Chloe handled the guest list. I'm sure yours is on the way." A week passed. Nothing. A month passed. Still nothing. The wedding was 3 months away. Then my cousin Brooke called, gushing. "Ave, your brother's wedding invitation is gorgeous." And Chloe included a little handwritten note. So sweet. My heart sank. A handwritten note for a cousin, but nothing for the groom's sister who funded the core event. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't been invited. I wasn't just excluded from the planning. I was excluded from the event itself. I was merely the resource. The venue, the money, the food, they were welcome. I was not. I immediately texted Ethan, trying to keep my tone light. "Need to finalize my attendance details for your wedding. Should I bring a +1? His reply was short, evasive, and chilling. "Still working out some details. We'll let you know soon." The final, devastating truth emerged when a friend, who worked at the Hayes Country Club in Palm Beach, called me with an anonymous warning. She had overheard Chloe laughing with her bridesmaids during a planning brunch. "She actually thinks she'll be sitting at the family table," Chloe had reportedly sneered, "as if we would want someone like her front and center in the photos. But we need to keep her happy until the big day, since she controls the venue." And then came the line that solidified my resolve and turned my hurt into cold, righteous fury. "What about the $80,000 she contributed?" a bridesmaid had asked. Chloe's response, "That money is already spent." What is she going to do? Ask for it back? Ethan says she's loaded. She'll get over it. They plan to steal my gift, use my venue, humiliate my staff, and banish me, all while maintaining a polite, transactional smile. I was a mark, a necessary utility, not a loved one. The stage was set for the public humiliation that would force the ultimate confrontation. The passive pain was over. It was time for the CEO of Sterling to step up and defend her honor, as well as the honest man her brother used to be. The next chapter, the public showdown, would be unforgettable. The revelation that they planned to take my $80,000 and still ban me from the event was the final, corrosive drop that turned the water toxic. I had endured the subtle slights, the blatant classism, and the forced professionalism. But calculating malice, the deliberate intent to defraud and humiliate, was a step too far. The opportunity for a public confrontation arrived a week later when our parents, George and Diane, organized a mandatory peace dinner downtown. It was the first time in over 10 years that both my divorced parents had agreed to be in the same room, a testament to the magnitude of Ethan's marriage. The dinner included Ethan, Chloe, my parents, and me. From the moment we sat down at the upscale downtown restaurant, the tension was suffocating. Chloe kept shooting cold glances my way, whispering to Ethan, and avoiding any conversation that steered toward the wedding's inner workings. My parents, typically oblivious to social warfare, sensed the deep hostility between me and Chloe. Then Vivian's philosophy, the core of the Hayes cruelty, came out, delivered by Chloe herself. The conversation had been strained, mostly about my father's quiet retirement plans, when Chloe cut in, her voice suddenly loud and performative. "Mother always says a wedding is not just a party, it's a statement," she announced, looking directly at me with eyes that held a smug triumph. "It's about having the right connections, the proper guests, the correct atmosphere. Some people simply don't understand the social implications of a high-profile event." My mother, Diane, ever the peacemaker, tried to change the subject. "Well, Avery has been so generous. The Sterling Grand looks absolutely stunning, Chloe." Chloe's smile was thin, edged with ice. "Yes, the financial arrangement has been helpful, though we have had to make substantial upgrades to bring the space up to the appropriate standard. The basic package was, well, basic. Substandard. My flagship hotel, the crown jewel of my life's work, which hosted world leaders and celebrities, was being publicly dismissed as substandard by a woman who had never earned a dime in her life. The $80,000 gift was being framed as barely adequate compensation for the bother of hosting her. "The Sterling Grand is a five-star establishment," I stated, my voice low and steady, dangerously controlled. "We host society weddings on a regular basis. The upgrades are for your personal taste, not a reflection of the venue's quality." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Of course, dear, but there is a difference between serving the elite and being one of them, isn't there?" That was it, the public final declaration. I was the help. I was the service, the mechanism, but never the equal. The implication was clear. I was too dirty from the work, too connected to the lower classes, to be a respected family member at her society debut. I immediately looked at Ethan, hoping, praying, that the brother who once stood up to every bully for me would finally break his silence. He had to defend the foundation of our entire life. But Ethan, my strong, protective, big brother, was studying his plate intently. He avoided my gaze. He said nothing. He chose his silence, and in that silence he betrayed everything we had ever been. My father, George, who rarely engaged in emotional drama, finally picked up on the toxic atmosphere. "Ethan, is this true? Are you allowing this to happen?" Ethan mumbled something about it being complicated and social pressure, but offered no defense of me. He chose Chloe's gilded future over his own sister's dignity. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly, the sound echoing in the expensive room. I didn't shout or cry. I just gave Ethan a look of profound, chilling finality. "Enjoy your dinner, Ethan," I said, "but the conversation is over. You have made your choice, and now I will make mine." I walked out, leaving my parents stunned and Ethan trapped between the two warring sides. I knew what I had to do. The passive hurt was replaced by a CEO's cold resolve. I had to secure my contract, protect my staff, and reclaim my dignity. I went home and immediately drafted a formal internal memo to my legal team, citing the contract violation and detailing the Hayes attempt at fraud and malicious exclusion. I was ready to execute the nuclear option, but I needed one final, undeniable confirmation. It came the very next day. My phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered it in my office. "Hello, is this Avery Warren?" A crisp, professional female voice inquired. "Yes, speaking." "This is Lauren Bell, the wedding planner for the Avery Hayes ceremony at the Sterling Grand. I am calling regarding your attendance." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, Lauren. What about it?" "I have been instructed by the family, Miss Hayes and her mother, to inform you that your invitation to the wedding has been canceled. However, they would like to retain the deposit you provided, as it is non-refundable." The world tilted. They didn't even have the decency to tell Ethan to call me. They outsourced the final, cruelest act of betrayal to a hired planner. "Which family?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Did my brother, Ethan, agree to this arrangement?" Lauren paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I was assured by Mr. Warren that Miss Hayes is fully aware of and has consented to the revision of the guest list. She felt your presence might distract from the intended atmosphere, and she was concerned about you being perceived as staff rather than family given your ownership." The cruelty, the sheer, calculated betrayal of Ethan agreeing to keep my $80,000 while banning me from his wedding was the last straw. The woman who came from nothing, who built an empire on grit and self-respect, had been pushed too far. I was no longer the hurt sister. I was the CEO taking control of her assets and her dignity. My counterattack, the definitive moment of the entire saga, was about to begin. The phone call with Lauren Bell, the wedding planner, was the moment the tide turned. Her dry, business-like confirmation that Ethan had agreed to keep the $80,000 and exclude me, his only sister, solidified my rage. It wasn't about the money. It was about the profound, disgusting attempt to commit fraud and malice. "Lauren," I said, my voice now calm, steady, and terrifyingly clear. "Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate your honesty in delivering an instruction you were clearly uncomfortable with." There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. I simply followed the client's directive, Ms. Warren." "I understand. In that case, I have a new directive for you to follow. Please inform Miss Hayes and Mr. Warren that the entire wedding is now canceled." "Ms. Warren, you can't." Lauren gasped, her professionalism momentarily dissolving. "You don't have the authority. You're not the bride or groom." "No," I agreed smoothly. "But I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel chain they booked for out-of-town guests. And according to Section 12 of the contract, the ethical conduct and standards clause they all signed, I reserve the right to cancel any event that violates our company's core values, which include respect and integrity." I leaned back in my chair. The view of the Dallas skyline spread beneath me, feeling the exhilarating power of reclaiming my authority. Attempting to exclude the venue owner from an event while retaining her significant financial contribution constitutes both a violation of ethical standards and a clear intent to commit fraud. The contract is null and void. But the vendors, the guests, the deposits, Lauren stammered, realizing the catastrophic social disaster she was about to relay. "Yes, unfortunate timing," I acknowledged without a hint of warmth. "Please inform Miss Hayes and my brother that unless I receive a formal, unreserved apology and a personal invitation to the wedding by 5 p.m. today, the Sterling Grand will no longer be available for their event. All deposits will be forfeited as per the cancellation policy they agreed to. I recommend you deliver that message promptly." I hung up, cutting off her panicked protestations. I didn't feel relief. I felt cold, calculated certainty. The time for being the passive, loving sister was over. I was now the CEO protecting her assets, and more importantly, her self-respect. The moment of truth arrived at 4:55 p.m. My executive assistant rushed into my office. "Ms. Warren, Ethan is here." And he brought the entire family, Chloe, Mr. Hayes, and Mrs. Hayes. "They are demanding to see you." I instructed my assistant to escort them not to my private office, but to the main conference room, a large, sterile space designed for business disputes, not family dramas. I wanted the setting to emphasize the nature of this confrontation. This was a negotiation, not an emotional plea. When I walked into the room at 5 p.m. precisely, the tension was a physical entity. Chloe was red-faced, clinging to her mother, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Vivian looked apoplectic, her face white with suppressed fury. Winston Hayes, the man of intimidating presence, stood ready to unleash legal threats. And Ethan, my brother, looked like a stranger, trapped and utterly ashamed. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Avery?" Winston Hayes demanded, his voice booming. "This is outrageous. We have a binding agreement. We will sue you for everything you own." I walked to the head of the long table, remaining standing, radiating quiet power. "I am enforcing the terms of our contract, Mr. Hayes, specifically the ethical conduct clause. Attempting to exclude the owner from a contracted event while retaining her substantial financial contribution constitutes malicious intent, and fraud. Fraud! Vivian scoffed. The money was a gift. Gifts that are part of a business transaction and secured by a signed contract come with implicit conditions of good faith and respect, I countered. Your daughter admitted her intent to defraud me to her bridesmaids, boasting that she would keep the money while banning me from the premises. That is now documented evidence. The contract is null and void. Ethan, finally finding a weak voice, spoke up. Ave, come on. It's a misunderstanding. Lauren must have mixed up the instructions. Lauren Bell, who had been quietly observing from the corner, straightened her spine. I followed Miss Hayes's instructions exactly as they were given to me, Mr. Warren. I was told to inform Ms. Warren that her invitation was revoked and the deposit would be retained. The color drained from Ethan's face. The last vestige of his denial was stripped away. The public truth was now undeniable. You agreed to this, Ethan? My voice was low, cutting through the chaos. You agreed to take my $80,000 and ban your only sister from your wedding? How did you think that would make me feel? He looked trapped, his eyes darting between Chloe's furious gaze and my steady resolve. He had no answer. Winston Hayes, realizing they were over a barrel, shifted gears from aggression to negotiation. Enough. Let's be practical. Miss Warren, what exactly do you want to let the wedding proceed? I looked directly at Ethan, ignoring the Hayes entirely. I want the brother I grew up with to decide what kind of man he is going to be. Am I just an obligation to be tolerated, or do you actually want your only sister at your wedding? The room fell silent. This was the moment of truth. His choice would not just determine the fate of the wedding. It would determine the fate of our lifelong bond. The clock was still ticking, metaphorically, on Ethan's soul. The conference room went silent, the tension so thick it felt like glass about to shatter. All eyes were on Ethan. His gaze, which had been fixed on the plush carpet, finally lifted, moving past the furious, tear-streaked face of Chloe and the imperious scowl of Vivian, until it met mine. I want you there, Ave, he said, his voice quiet, raw, and trembling slightly. I always did. I got caught up in everything. The pressure, the expectations. I thought I had to make everything perfect for them. Perfect for whom? I asked softly, pushing the moment of vulnerability. He shook his head, unable to articulate the depth of his compromise. But that admission that he wanted me there, not the societal benefits, was the sign I needed. The core of my brother was still fighting the gilded infection. Chloe erupted. You can't be serious, Ethan. After this stunt, she tried to ruin our entire wedding. And you tried to steal $80,000 from my sister while banning her from the event she funded, Ethan countered, finally standing a little straighter. Think about that, Chloe. How would you feel if someone did that to you? The Hayes were momentarily stunned by Ethan's unexpected defense of me. Winston Hayes, however, was a pragmatist. He saw the disaster looming. Ethan is correct, Winston said, cutting through Chloe's protests. Miss Warren has put us in an untenable position. We need to stabilize this immediately. He looked at me, a grudging respect in his eyes. Very well, Miss Warren. You have our attention. What are your specific, final terms to allow the event to proceed? I addressed the entire room, my voice firm and clear, establishing the new, non-negotiable terms of respect. The wedding will proceed as scheduled under the following conditions. First, I will receive a formal, legally binding, written apology from both Miss Hayes and Mrs. Hayes within 24 hours, acknowledging the disrespectful and unethical conduct displayed. This is not a suggestion. It is a signed statement of fact. Vivian opened her mouth to protest, but Winston shot her a warning glance. Second, I continued, I will be treated with the full and unequivocal respect due to a family member and the owner of this establishment throughout all wedding events. This means no more snide remarks about the help, no more insinuations of substandard service, and full, visible inclusion in all family functions. Third, and this is important for Ethan's future, I said, looking at my brother, my $80,000 contribution will be publicly acknowledged in the wedding program, not as a venue discount, but as a gift from a loving sister to the couple. Winston nodded thoughtfully. Those terms are reasonable, given the circumstances. We agree. No, father, this is extortion. Chloe shrieked, collapsing into tears again. It is a boundary, Chloe, I corrected her. I spent months accommodating every demand, absorbing every slight, and financing a significant portion of your wedding. In return, I was treated with contempt and excluded entirely. That ends today. The cost of your wedding is now respect. I looked at Ethan one last time. Do we have an agreement, Ethan? Do you agree to ensure these terms are met? He nodded, tears now mixing with the shame on his face. Yes, Avenue. I agree. And I'm sorry. I should never have let things get this far. It was a start, a fragile, wounded start. I had secured my seat, my money, and my dignity, but the emotional chasm between us remained wide. Then the wedding will proceed, I said, opening the conference room door to signal the end of the meeting. Lauren will coordinate with my staff on the final details. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow for the written apologies. As the Hayes filed out, their faces a mixture of fury and defeat, Ethan lingered. When we were alone, he turned to me, the facade crumbling. I don't know who I've become these past few months, Avenue. Neither do I admitted, my voice gentle. But you just took the first step back toward him. Thank you for not letting them keep that money and ban me. That was the lowest form of betrayal. I know, he choked out. I realized at that moment I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I hope you figure out what that mistake truly is before you say, I do, I warned him. Marriage is hard enough when you are being true to yourself. As he left to join his waiting, furious fiancé, I felt a strange mix of triumph and dread. I had won the business negotiation, but the real victory, Ethan's lasting happiness and integrity, is still hanging in the balance, waiting for the ceremony itself. The final act of this drama would play out 2 days later at the altar. The immediate fallout from the conference room showdown was a furious scramble, a panicked effort by the Hayes to sanitize the disaster. True to the terms, the written apologies arrived the next afternoon via courier. Ethan's note was a simple, crumpled sheet of paper, heartfelt and genuinely remorseful, detailing his shame for his silence and his misplaced priorities. I lost sight of who I am and who we are, Avenue. Your love is worth more than their acceptance. I am trying to find my way back. Please forgive me. Chloe's and Vivian's apologies, however, were polished and cold. They were clearly drafted by an attorney, fulfilling the technical requirement without any emotional cost. They used phrases like regret any perceived lack of decorum and sincerely apologized for any miscommunication regarding the guest list. They were signed but utterly hollow. Still, they met the terms of the settlement. The rehearsal dinner, held 2 nights before the wedding, was the first public test of the forced truce. I walked into the private dining room at a high-end restaurant, wearing a custom-tailored emerald green dress, a statement of success and quiet power. The room hushed instantly. Everyone knew something dramatic had happened, even if they didn't know the exact details. Ethan immediately broke free from a conversation, rushing over to me with a genuine smile, kissing my cheek, and steering me toward the seat of honor next to him, a very public display of affirmation. Chloe, across the table, offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes, stiffly acknowledging me. The ultimate surprise came from Winston Hayes. He approached me with a glass of champagne, his posture less aggressive, more respectful. "Miss Warren," he said, extending his hand, "I want to personally apologize for the unpleasantness earlier this week. In business, I always value directness and integrity. You displayed both, and I respect that." I accepted his handshake. "Thank you, Winston. I appreciate your understanding." I knew he saw me as a formidable opponent, a business equal, which was a higher form of respect than any false family warmth. Throughout the dinner, I noticed Ethan watching Chloe with an increasingly thoughtful expression. She was in full performance mode, holding court, accepting compliments, and basking in the pre-wedding glow. But when she thought no one important was looking, the mask slipped. She snapped sharp, low-voiced instructions at the waiter, rolled her eyes at a slightly awkward toast from Ethan's uncle, and generally acted like a tired monarch presiding over her court. Ethan saw it all. He caught my eye a few times, a look of profound doubt passing between us. After dinner, Ethan found me on the balcony overlooking the city. "You look beautiful tonight, Ave," he said, joining me at the railing. "Thank you. You look exhausted," I replied honestly. We stood in a rare moment of comfortable silence, the first we'd truly shared in months. He finally spoke, his voice low and defeated. "I keep thinking about what you said, about being true to myself. I don't know if I am." He leaned against the railing. Everything happened so fast with Chloe. She was the golden ticket. Avenue dating her felt like being admitted to an exclusive club I never knew existed. I thought her life, her connections, that was the finish line. And now, I prompted gently, now I'm standing on a balcony, hiding from my own rehearsal dinner, wondering if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, he confessed. "The way she and her mother treated you. It opened my eyes to things I've been ignoring. The way she speaks to the servers, the comments she makes about my friends from construction, the constant pressure to improve myself by changing everything about who I am." "Those are valid concerns, Ethan," I acknowledged. "But the wedding is in 2 days. Everything is paid for. Guests are flying in from Europe. Canceling now would be a disaster. More of a disaster than a divorce in a year or 5 years, potentially with children involved." I asked softly, using the same question I had posed a few days earlier. Before he could respond, Chloe's voice cut through the quiet night air. "There you are, darling. Everyone is asking where you disappeared to. The Harringtons are about to leave, and they flew all the way from London." The mask slammed back into place on Ethan's face. He turned to his fiancée with a practiced, weary smile. "Just getting some air with Avery. We'll be right in." As Chloe retreated, Ethan gave me an apologetic look. "I have to go." "Of course," I said, touching his arm gently. "But Ethan, whatever you decide tomorrow, I will support you. That is what real family does. The kind that values your soul more than your status." I watched him walk away, back toward the glitter and the lies. I had drawn the line, I had forced the apologies, and I had opened his eyes. The rest was up to him. I knew I was going to attend the wedding, but I had a chilling premonition that the climax of this drama would not be the exchange of rings, but the dramatic, shocking, career-ending silence at the altar. The morning of the wedding was, predictably, perfect. The kind of clear, flawless June day that wedding planners dream of, and that photographers charge extra for. The Sterling Grand was a spectacle, transformed into a floral wonderland with white roses and orchids adorning every surface, exactly as Chloe had meticulously demanded. I was getting ready in the bridal suite, a quiet act of irony. I chose a stunning emerald green dress, a color of quiet power, not a pastel meant to blend into the bridal party. My presence today was meant to be a statement. I was here as the groom's sister, the venue owner, and the ultimate keeper of the family's conscience. My mother, Diane, came to see me before the ceremony, her face etched with worry. "Avery, are you sure about this? It feels like we're walking into a bomb site." "We are, Mom," I admitted, zipping the back of my dress. "But the bomb is Ethan's choice, not mine." I drew my line and I won my dignity back. Now, I'm here to witness his decision. If he chooses Chloe, I will smile, give him a wedding gift, and grieve the loss of my brother later. If he chooses himself, I will be the first one to cheer. I put on my highest heels, feeling the strength of my resolve. I had learned that the fear of a disaster is often worse than the disaster itself. I was no longer afraid of a scandal. I was only afraid of seeing Ethan lose himself completely. Downstairs, the atmosphere was a mix of giddy excitement and palpable anxiety. The Hays were maneuvering through the guests, radiating practiced charm. Ethan, however, was visibly strained. I caught a glimpse of him near the main entrance, his tuxedo impeccable, his eyes dark with exhaustion. He looked like a man about to walk the plank, not a groom about to celebrate. Just minutes before the processional began, I found him sequestered in the quiet hallway that led to the service entrance, the place where the staff and owners retreat. He was staring at the wall, running a trembling hand through his hair. "You look ready to bolt," I commented, my voice gentle. He turned to me, his eyes wide and pleading. "I can't do it," he choked out. "I can't. Every time I think about saying I do, I see Vivian's face and I hear her telling you that you're the help. I feel sick." "Then don't," I stated simply. "You're Ethan Warren. You're a man who built his life from scratch. You owe these people nothing. You don't have to walk down that aisle, Ethan. You can tell them right now that the wedding is off. Your dignity is worth more than their connections." He shook his head, frantically. "The embarrassment, Ave. The Hays will destroy me. The lawsuits. My career. I'm in too deep." "You are not in too deep," I countered, stepping closer, meeting his gaze fiercely. "You came from Queens, James. We faced eviction and poverty. You were never afraid of losing money. You were only afraid of losing me. You are only afraid of losing their approval. And their approval costs you everything." I put my hands on his shoulders, forcing him to look at the man he still was, the man beneath the borrowed suit. "Listen to me, Ethan. This is your final chance. If you marry her, you choose to endorse their cruelty and their values. If you do that, you choose a life I cannot be part of. I will not stand by and watch you betray everything we stood for. I love you, but I love myself more. Choose wisely." I released him and walked toward the entrance of the ballroom, leaving him alone with his conscience. I had said everything I could. I had drawn the line, offered the truth, and laid bare the consequence. The decision, the responsibility for his life, was entirely his. The grand music swelled. The processional began. I took my seat in the front row, a visible sentinel of the Warren family. Chloe's bridesmaids floated down the aisle. Ethan, looking handsome but pale, took his place at the altar. The entire ballroom was bathed in candlelight, the air thick with the scent of expensive white roses. The doors opened for Chloe. She appeared on her father's arm, magnificent and flawless, the epitome of the high society bride. The ceremony proceeded. The minister's voice was clear, the words a sacred contract. I watched Ethan's face, a strange stillness, a cold resolution settling over his features. Then came the pivotal moment, the final, terrifying question. The minister looked at Ethan, waiting for the traditional affirmation. Ethan, do you take this woman, Chloe, to be your lawfully wedded wife? The silence that followed was immense, profound, stretching past the point of social comfort. The haze shifted, their faces tense. Chloe, beside him, looked up, irritation starting to cloud her perfect features. Ethan looked straight ahead. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned his head and looked directly at me. In that long, silent gaze, I saw it, the fear, the shame, and then the final, liberating clarity. The real Ethan Warren was back. The shocking, scandalous culmination of this entire drama was about to unfold, live at the altar. The silence at the altar was a vacuum, sucking all the air and sound out of the vast ballroom. Chloe, her eyes narrow and sharp, finally hissed, "Then say I do. Stop this ridiculous drama." Ethan didn't look at her. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the kind that anchors a man about to perform an act of immense courage. His eyes, clear and fixed on mine, contained a look of profound apology and gratitude. Then he spoke. His voice was strong now, infused with a righteous conviction that carried easily through the room. No, the sound was not loud, but it was definitive. It landed on the velvet silence like a hammer blow. Gasps rippled through the rows of stunned guests. Winston Hayes half rose from his seat, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson. Ethan didn't stop. He turned his body, facing the assembled guests, the very people he had spent months trying to impress. "I cannot do this," he announced, his voice ringing with a new, liberating honesty. "I cannot start a marriage built on a lie, and I cannot start my future by betraying the one person who has been my only true family." Chloe finally erupted. "You miserable fool! What are you doing? Think about the money, the disgrace." Ethan turned to her, his expression resolute. "I am sorry, Chloe, but the moment I chose to stand by while your mother called my sister the help, and the moment I agreed to take her money while banning her from this room, I lost myself. I realized that if I married you, I would be endorsing that cruelty. I would be prioritizing a superficial social climb over my own integrity." He reached up, pulled the lapel of his expensive, borrowed tuxedo, and dropped them to the marble floor with a sharp clink. "Chloe, you are a beautiful woman, but you and your family represent everything I promised myself I would never become: shallow, cruel, and defined only by inherited wealth. I can't stand up here and promise you forever when I've already destroyed my integrity and my only true family to get here." The chaos was instant and breathtaking. Chloe's wail of fury and humiliation echoed off the high ceilings. Vivian collapsed onto a nearby chair, shouting incoherently about lawsuits and ruined reputations. The scene was instantly, dramatically, socially catastrophic. Ethan ignored it all. He stepped down from the altar, walked quickly past the minister, past his weeping bride, and through the bewildered chaos of the front rows. He walked straight to me. I stood up, my eyes locked on his. He reached out, his hand finding mine, the grip strong, warm, and familiar, the grip of the brother who held my hand at crosswalks 2 decades ago. "I'm sorry, Ave," he whispered, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path through the shame on his cheek. "I almost lost you. I almost lost everything. Thank you for fighting for me." "Let's go, Ethan," I said, my own voice tight with emotion. Hand in hand, my brother and I walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the shattered fantasy, the $1 million wreckage, and the social elite reeling in their seats. That walk, the walk of shame for the Hayes, was a walk of glorious freedom for us. We found refuge in my presidential suite, far above the chaos. Ethan sank onto the sofa, shaking with relief and disbelief. "Did you see their faces?" he laughed, half crying. "Did you see Winston's face? I think I just set myself on fire socially." "You did," I confirmed, handing him a glass of water. "But you chose principle over pedigree. That takes real guts, Ethan. I'm proud of you." He took a large drink, looking suddenly lighter, younger, and entirely himself again. "I'm going to pay for this financially and socially, I know." But the moment the minister asked that question, all I could think about was your face and the truth you forced me to confront. I realized I was trading my soul for a life I didn't even want. "So, what now?" I asked. He shrugged, the weight of the Range Rover and the leased condo gone. "I go back to my place, return to work, start over. It's going to be embarrassing for a while, but at least I'll be living authentically. I owe the Hayes their money for the costs they covered, but I won't owe them my integrity." I squeezed his hand. "That's the Ethan I know, and I'll be there every step of the way. That's what family does." The immediate fallout was exactly the social explosion the Hayes had feared. The story was everywhere, on every society blog, in every gossip column. The altar breakup at the Sterling Grand in Dallas, a scandalous tale of a working-class groom choosing grit over gold. But amidst the scandal, a strange thing happened. Public sympathy largely sided with Ethan, praising his courage for prioritizing family and self-respect over a toxic, transactional relationship. The truth about the Hayes' cruelty had finally surfaced. The war was over. I had my brother back, a man who had made the hardest, most necessary choice of his life. But the scars remained, and the path to rebuilding our bond and finding Ethan a true, honest future had only just begun. The 6 months following the altar breakup were a period of intense rebuilding. Ethan threw himself back into construction, specializing in custom, high-end design work, the kind of projects that required talent and trust, not just a flashy surname. He sold the leased SUV, moved into a modest but comfortable condo, and slowly, deliberately began repaying the Hayes for their portion of the non-wedding costs, fulfilling his promise to not owe them anything but the basic debt of fairness. The one remaining complication was the $80,000 deposit. I held it in escrow, fully expecting Winston Hayes' legal team to try and reclaim it. But the lawsuit never came. The Hayes were too busy managing the social fallout, which had deeply damaged Vivian's standing in their exclusive circles. 6 months to the day after the ceremony that never happened, I received an unexpected visitor. My executive assistant announced, "Ms. Warren, Chloe Hayes is here. She has no appointment, but she insists it's a personal matter." I was surprised but intrigued. "Send her in." Chloe entered my office. She looked like a shadow of the society princess I remembered. She was dressed in simple, unadorned clothes, her makeup minimal, and her diamond engagement ring conspicuously absent. She looked tired, vulnerable, and completely deflated. She sat down, her hands folded nervously in her lap. "Avery!" she began, her voice lacking the entitled edge I was so accustomed to. "I know you hate me, and you have every right to." "I don't hate you, Chloe," I corrected her gently. "Hate is an emotional investment. I just feel pity for the person you allowed yourself to be." She flinched. "I know. I came here because I needed to say this to you, face to face. Not for Ethan. For me." She confessed that the social fallout had been devastating. Her family, obsessed with appearance, had blamed her entirely. But in the quiet isolation that followed, without her mother's constant influence, she had been forced to look at herself, at the insecurity, the profound lack of self-worth that she had covered up with snobbery and cruelty. "It wasn't about Ethan or the money," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "It was about you. You built everything. You were self-made. You had a real, honest connection with your brother. And I had nothing real. My family's legacy is built on judging others. I was so insecure about my own lack of substance that I had to tear you down to feel superior." It was a stunning, shocking moment of vulnerability, the kind of raw confession you don't expect from a lifetime rival. It hit me that her cruelty wasn't personal. It was a symptom of a deeper, systemic issue within her gilded world. "I appreciate your honesty, Chloe," I said. "Genuine apologies are rare, especially from your world." She reached into her purse and pulled out a clean, crisp envelope. She slid it across my desk. "There's one more thing." Inside was a certified bank check for $80,000. "Your deposit," she explained. "It should have been returned to you immediately after the wedding was canceled. It was wrong of me to try to keep it. I insisted my father not sue you, and I am giving this back. It's the right thing to do." I stared at the check. The sight of the number was no longer a wound, but a profound vindication. I had won the moral victory, and now I had the ultimate symbol of that victory. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, putting the check down. "I accept your apology and the return of the funds." She stood up, looking visibly relieved. "I thought about reaching out to Ethan, but he seems happy with Julia. He deserves that. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I wish you both well." With that, she walked out. I sat there, holding the check, feeling a rush of exhilaration and clarity. This money, cleansed of its toxic history, couldn't just go back into my corporate ledger. It needed to become a lasting symbol of the values Ethan and I had fought for. I called my legal and finance team. "We are establishing the True Love, True Values grant," I told them. "The initial funding will be the $80,000 returned by Chloe, matched by my own company. We are going to fund the weddings of couples who demonstrate authentic commitment and community spirit, not financial excess." I knew exactly who I needed as my co-founder. I called Ethan. "I need your help, co-founder. It's time to turn a massive mistake into a legacy of meaning." The universe, it seemed, was determined to give Ethan a second chance at love, too. And in the process of rebuilding his life and his purpose, he had already found her. The True Love, True Values grant quickly became the most rewarding project I had ever undertaken. The $80,000 check, redeemed from the wreckage of the non-wedding, was immediately matched by Sterling Hotels, creating a substantial seed fund. Ethan and I structured the grant to be awarded to 2 couples annually who demonstrated that their marriage was founded on sincerity, community service, and shared purpose, rather than lavish spending. Ethan, serving as the grant's co-chair, found a renewed sense of purpose, reading the earnest, heartfelt applications. Couples who wanted to host their receptions in community centers or use their wedding money to fund a down payment on a house reminded him daily of the honest values he had nearly abandoned. It was during the first round of grant applications that he met Julia. Julia wasn't an applicant, but an expert in sustainable design. We had consulted her firm for ideas on how to incorporate organic, natural elements into the grant recipients' venues, many of which were simple outdoor spaces. Julia was a landscape architect, working with soil and sun, not diamonds and silks. She was intelligent, grounded, and had a warmth that reached her eyes, the opposite of Chloe's cold elegance. Ethan was instantly taken with her quiet authenticity. Julia, in turn, was impressed by Ethan's knowledge of construction and his genuine passion for the grant's mission. She saw the real Ethan Warren, the man who loved to build things not by status. Their dates were the antithesis of his time with Chloe. They didn't go to exclusive restaurants. They spent weekends hiking the Appalachian Trail, visiting botanical gardens, and fixing up Ethan's modest new condo, which he had bought with savings and the pride of his own labor. Julia wore sensible boots and smelled faintly of earth and essential oils, not expensive perfume. For the first time since he left Queens, Ethan didn't have to perform. He could talk about concrete, blueprints, and the satisfaction of a job well done. He told Julia the whole story of the canceled wedding, the embarrassment, the betrayal, and my ultimatum. Julia listened with empathy and deep respect. "Avery's strength saved you, Ethan," she told him. "She risked losing you because she valued your soul more than the relationship. That's true love. That validation, that someone outside our immediate family understood and admired the difficult choice he had made, was healing for Ethan." Their relationship quickly deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. A little over a year after the non-wedding, Ethan called me. His voice was thick with emotion, but this time it was pure, unadulterated joy. "I need your advice, Avenue. I proposed to Julia." "Oh, Ethan, that's wonderful. Did she say yes?" "She did," he laughed. "And I didn't use any borrowed money. I used the antique silver band that belonged to Grandma Diane. It means something." And she cried, Avenue. She cried because it was perfect. His proposal wasn't a social performance. It was a deeply personal, intimate commitment. He had learned his lesson deeply. The wedding planning was simple, elegant, and focused entirely on meaning. They chose to have a small, intimate ceremony for 50 people. The location? The private garden terrace at the Sterling Grand in Dallas, the same venue, but a different, more natural space, one that Ethan and I had personally designed together years ago. The cost was minimal, paid for entirely by them, reflecting their grounded personalities. When they asked me to be involved, I was honored. I offered the terrace rental as my wedding gift, not the whole grand ballroom. And this time they accepted it with sincere gratitude and a clear understanding of what it meant. A gift of love, not a transaction of class. The final, powerful gesture came when Ethan sat me down at our old pizza place. "Ave," he said, meeting my gaze. "I have a big ask. I need you to be my best man." I was momentarily stunned. "Your best man?" "Ethan, I'm your sister. And I'm a woman." He grinned, the old, mischievous spark back in his eyes. "Exactly. That's the point. I don't need a traditional best man. I need the best person who has ever stood by me. You are my truest family. You stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. You fought for my integrity, even when I was trying to throw it away. You are the only person who deserves to stand next to me when I say I do to the right person." I had to wipe away tears. This gesture wasn't just sweet. It was a public, definitive affirmation of the primacy of our bond and the victory of self-respect. The journey from the humiliated sister to the honored best woman was now complete, setting the stage for the true, authentic wedding in the final chapter. The wedding day of Ethan and Julia, held almost 2 years after the catastrophe with Chloe, was perfect. It wasn't perfect in the lavish, high-budget way the Hayes had demanded. It was perfect in its simplicity and profound authenticity. The Sterling Grand's garden terrace, usually reserved for quiet morning coffee, was transformed by Julia's touch, simple white florals, lush green herbs, and twinkling fairy lights, reflecting their grounded, honest personalities. The guest list was small, just 50 people. It was a crowd with grit and love. My mother, Diane, Ethan's construction crew buddies, Julia's colleagues from the landscape architecture firm, and our closest friends. There were no social climbers, no distant society connections, just people who genuinely loved Ethan and Julia. I stood beside Ethan, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, my first time serving as a best woman. Holding the simple, antique silver band in my pocket, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This time, I was holding a ring that symbolized true value, not financial debt. Julia walked down the makeshift aisle, escorted by her father. She wore an elegant, simple gown and a garland of fresh flowers instead of a tiara. She radiated a calm, profound happiness that was unmistakable. As the minister spoke, the words were focused on partnership, service to each other, and mutual support, a clear contrast to the flowery, transactional vows planned for the haze ceremony. When the minister asked Ethan, "Ethan, do you take this woman?" Ethan looked at Julia with a love so deep and clear it felt like a visible force. "I do," he said, his voice strong, unwavering, and entirely free. The moment they exchanged vows, a wave of profound relief washed over me. This was the "I do" that mattered. This was the commitment to the values he and I had fought so hard to reclaim. During the reception, held right there on the terrace, Ethan gave his toast. He didn't focus on Julia's beauty or their future success. He looked at me, raising his glass, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Before I thank my beautiful wife," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I have to thank the person who ensured I was standing here today as an honest man, my sister, Avery." He paused, letting the emotion settle over the small crowd. 2 years ago, I was standing at an altar, ready to marry the wrong person, living a lie, and sacrificing the most important relationship in my life. I was wearing the wrong suit, saying the wrong words, and I was drowning in the fear of disappointing others. He looked straight at me, his gaze fierce with gratitude. Avery didn't save me by being nice. She saved me by being tough. She risked $80,000. She risked a public feud, and she risked losing me to force me to see the truth. She stood up for the integrity and respect that our family was founded on. If it wasn't for her willingness to say no, when everyone else expected yes, I wouldn't be standing here today as a man who knows his worth and the value of true love. He raised his glass higher. "To my best woman, Avery, my partner in survival, my co-founder in life, and the toughest, most loving person I know. Thank you for not letting me sell my soul. I owe you everything." The crowd cheered, not for the extravagance of the event, but for the raw honesty of the story. I wiped a tear away, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. This was the final, public affirmation of everything I had stood for. I had lost the $80,000 gift once, only to gain back a priceless brother. Later, as the party wound down, Ethan and I stood by the edge of the terrace, looking at the Dallas city lights. "You really found your peace, didn't you?" I asked him. "I did," he replied, putting his arm around me. "And I owe it all to you. You taught me the difference between status and value. The Hays offered me access to their world. You offered me access to myself." The story wasn't just about Ethan finding Julia. It was about Ethan finding himself. Thanks to a sister who was willing to be the necessary villain in his temporary fantasy to ensure he was the hero of his real life. The $80,000, now fully funding our True Love, True Values grant, had been completely redeemed. The venue, once a source of humiliation, was now a sanctuary of genuine joy. The ultimate lesson of my life was solidified, that self-respect is the only foundation upon which meaningful relationships can truly be built. The final chapter is about that enduring legacy. The final chapter of this story isn't about a grand finale. It's about the quiet, sustained victory of living authentically. The altar breakup wasn't the end of a tragedy. It was the explosive beginning of a life built on truth. In the years that followed Ethan and Julia's simple wedding, our family flourished. Ethan and Julia were happy, eventually welcoming a daughter, whom they named Alice, a nod to the clarity Ethan had found that fateful day. Ethan became a true partner in my hotel expansion, not just using his construction skills, but sharing my vision of integrity in business. He proved that he could achieve real, lasting success without the Hayes influence, on his own terms. The True Love, True Values grant grew into a national nonprofit. The original $80,000, redeemed from its toxic history, was the catalyst. We had countless applications every year from couples across the country who wanted a meaningful start to their marriage, not a massive debt. That money became a continuous, living rebuttal to the consumerist wedding culture, a legacy of the values Ethan and I had fought so hard to reclaim. My own life shifted profoundly. The relentless drive for external validation that had subconsciously fueled my early career was replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. I learned to choose clients and partners who valued my work ethic, not my net worth. I began teaching a course on ethical entrepreneurship, sharing not just business strategy, but the lesson of the boundary. Your integrity is your most valuable asset. Protect it fiercely. The most beautiful closure came from Chloe. She found her own path to self-respect, divorcing herself from her family's judgmental social circle. She pursued a career in nonprofit work, focusing on housing initiatives. She had found a genuine purpose that had nothing to do with her inherited status. When she crossed my path at a national conference, she thanked me, saying, "Your refusal to accept my manipulation broke the spell." It forced me to realize that I was using my status to mask how empty I felt. "You saved me, too, Avery." I realized then that when you stand up for yourself, you don't just protect your own soul. You often force others to confront the truth of theirs. My relationship with Ethan became the unshakable anchor of my life. We look back on the near wedding not with bitterness, but as our ultimate test of character. I was willing to lose the $80,000. I was willing to risk the public scandal, and I was willing to lose my brother to save his soul. That willingness to walk away from a toxic situation, to say no when everyone expected yes, was the single most powerful decision I ever made. The ultimate lesson I offer you, whether you're 20 or 60, is this: your value is not determined by what you accomplish, who accepts you, or how much you give. It is determined by the boundaries you set and the respect you demand. Ethan and I built an empire on grit and love, and when it was nearly destroyed by the temptation of status, it was self-respect, a CEO's fierce protection of her assets and a sister's unconditional love that brought it back. Your integrity is non-negotiable. Protect it, because sometimes saying no to a lie is the first step toward saying yes to the life and the love you truly deserve. Thank you for watching my story. If this resonated with you, share your experience in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe to hear more life lessons, and remember, your value is not determined by those who fail to see it.